Holy cow, what song was that? Well, we're trying a few different ones out, and I'm interested in what you think of them. The one song, these are songs that Chris DiPerno up in Syracuse, New York, put together, and so we thought we would just throw one out there to kind of throw you a curveball, and I think we're going to give it a shot and make you guys pick what song you like for this show. And as long as it's my favorite, we'll go with it. Something along those lines. Hey, welcome everybody. It is August the 28th, coming to you live from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've got Matt Griffin in the house. Matt Griffin, this is episode number 108. 108 episodes. Hey, I've been really excited about bringing him to you because this guy is something special, and I'm very impressed with him. And I'm in the midst of reading his book, about halfway through it. I meant to try to get through this week, but I'm busy. But a really cool book. I wanted to mention a couple of other things before we get rolling on that. One of our past guests, Brian O'Hara, remember him, the fingerprint guru. His book, you see that I'm holding, is now available for sale. And he wanted me to let you know. So that is really kind of geared more towards the fingerprint or the forensic science or gal. But there's some stories, memoirs, and he's got a lot of great stories in here. That's I wanted to mention. And last, I think I had mentioned something. I think it was last week. I mentioned a couple of books that I didn't have at the ready, and I said that they were really good. Watching that Manson, I was watching. Well, actually, it was the anniversary of the Manson murders, but I was watching the documentary on Netflix, and I don't know if you've seen that or not. There's 3 episodes to it. For the most part, most of it is stuff that I have seen before, but there were some interesting pictures that I've never seen, and it's worth a watch. One of the people that was on there that was talking a lot was Diane Lake, and this is the book that I wanted to make mention that she wrote, and I do recommend this book. I'm trying to get her to come on this show. I haven't been able to speak with her yet, but I've sent messages. But this book here, it talks about her joining the Manson family back when she was 14, which is insane, but she did. But it's actually a good read. I highly recommend that. And then the other book this is probably a first edition of it from 1978. And this was written by Charles Tex Watson, and it's called Will You Die for Me? And it's actually a really good book too. And if you've seen me talk before, if you've watched anything that I've ever, I wanted to do this, be a homicide detective because of that case. So obviously that's why I like talking about it. It's my favorite case to talk about. But watch the documentary. It's on Netflix. It kept my attention. I think it's definitely worth a watch and so forth. So I hope everybody had a really good week. I know that I've had a pretty decent week. I've got some stuff that I'm going to be doing on my house, and I'm going to be spending a small fortune on it. And so almost every day I've had a different person coming over here to, we're looking at different things that we're doing and so forth. So that right there is stressful. So if I look like I'm a little stressed, it's probably because of that. And, but other than that, I'm good. So Chris, I'm good, because Chris called me last week going, "Hey man, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm normal. Everything's good." But he probably saw the stress. Anytime I have to spend money, I get stressed. So anyway, tonight's going to be a great episode. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Episode 108. Hopefully we got a lot of people in the house already. I can see there's a lot of comments coming in. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate you being here. And is it Akai or Aka? Priscilla Kazumi. Appreciate you being here. And she's coming to us from Costa Rica. Welcome. I love it. I don't know that we've had somebody from there yet. And we've got people from all over the world, to include Australia, etc., that tune into this. That's great. My Aunt Sharon from Arizona's in the house, and many, many others. And I appreciate all of you. Phyllis, thank you for the donation. I do appreciate that more than you know. And I do appreciate that very much. JP Porter's in the house. Danny Couples, and many others. And I'm sure I'm going to see other people that are going to be popping in here. I wanted to tell you that our subscriber level is now to 4913. So that means that we are 87 away from hitting 5,000. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I really do. I appreciate everybody being in here. Danny, you love the music. Let me tell you, there's about 4 or 5. I still like the one that somehow disappeared off of it that we switched to. I like the hard rockin' music. That's kind of my favorite. But we're going to give people a chance to vote and tell us what they think. I thought that song was one of the better ones. That's why we started with that. And so, but let's get rolling here. I don't want to keep this guy. He's really somebody special. I'm honored to have met him. I saw him speak in Montana at the Montana Narcotics Officer Association. I had not heard him, and was sitting there. And as I'm sitting there, this guy's presentation, he's throwing up some pictures. And as I'm watching the pictures, I'm like, "Oh, there's my brother, and there's my nephew, and there's my sister-in-law in these pictures." And I'm like, he's speaking in Oklahoma. And so he had actually looked at the Association of Oklahoma Narcotics Officers, which is A1. It's kind of I think it's a Super Bowl conferences in this country. And so I was like, man, that's cool. And I actually picture of that. He's a best-selling author, keynote speaker, health advocate who spent years as a U.S. Navy search and rescue swimmer and 15 years as an undercover narcotics detective. After surviving a severe mental health crisis and PTSD stemming from frontline operations, he authored the powerful memoir, The Journey to Midnight. Today, Matt dedicates his platform to shattering the stigma around trauma, teaching resilience, vulnerability, and leadership to first responders, veterans, and high-pressure professionals worldwide. Like I said, I met him in Montana. I was very impressed with him, and I'm thrilled to introduce him to you. And it will be an interesting episode, no doubt, because he's had an incredible journey, and I am super stoked to have him here. By the way, my brother, why was he in a picture with my brother? Well, my brother was the first vice president of A1, and now he is the president. So he's moving up the ranks. He's actually legal counsel for the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. And I've tried to get him to come on here, and he's just a little intimidated by his older brother. And I think he's just scared. But maybe one day he will come on. Let's bring on Matt. Matt Griffin. Welcome, buddy.
Jason, thanks so much for having me, man. This is awesome. I can't believe it's been so long, man. This is awesome.
He and I were up in Montana in February, which is like you're sitting there thinking February in Montana, but it was like 60 degrees.
It's gorgeous.
We got snow, but it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous for sure.
It sure was. And like, I didn't know that like there's no like close airport to fly into. So I figured it was just when they said, oh, we'll have somebody pick you up at the airport. I figured that usually means it's within like a couple of miles. Man, we had like a 3-hour ride. I never met this guy over intercoastal mountains and everything. It was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Where did you fly into, incidentally?
Oh man.
Was it Bozeman?
Sure. Yeah, it was Bozeman, correct. Yep.
Yeah, me too. It's cool. It's a cool place. I want to go back. I definitely want to go back to Montana. But you speak all over the place. I love this, and we're going to talk more about that. That's something that he's involved in. Let's start off with telling me about your life. How did you get involved in law enforcement to begin with?
Yeah, I was never going to be I wasn't one of those guys that woke up and they were like, I always wanted to be a cop. So that was never kind of my deal. I grew up in northern New Jersey. I'm one of 6 kids. I'm the youngest boy. I got 2 older brothers. I got 2 older sisters and a younger sister. And, so went to a private high school to play lacrosse. I was on a scholarship. We didn't have a lot of money. So it was one of those things where, I had this opportunity to go to this great private high school and I was able to play lacrosse and football there. Anytime you're a little bit of an outcast coming in as a scholarship kid to a very wealthy private high school. So there was a lot of calamity there. And when I got done with that, I just decided I didn't want to do another 4 years of that. So I decided I was going to, it's funny. I went into the Marine recruiters and he's like high and tight and the uniform looked awesome. And I was like, all right, I'll be right back. I went down, I talked to the Army guys. They're like, man, you could be a Ranger, this, that, and the other. And then I went to the Navy guy and he said, where are you from? I said, northern New Jersey. He said, a small town. I said, kind of. He said, well, what happens if you don't like that small town? And I said, well, then I would leave it. He said, well, you can't do that in the Marines and the Army. He said, if it's the Navy, you pull out in 3 days. So if you want to go see the world, join the Navy. I'm like, oh, there we go. Done deal. So did the Navy thing for 6 years, man. I was blessed to be a SAR swimmer. And after that, I had put into what's called Seaman Admiral 21. I was going to be a career Navy guy where, you go back to college, you get your commission, and I got waitlisted on that. And I remember sitting in Chesapeake, Virginia. I was talking to my older brother, and he's just a great dude. And he said, "What are you going to do if you don't become, an officer?" I said, "Man, I haven't really thought about not getting it." And, it was the first time, like, I guess doubt kind of entered in my mind. And he said, "Well, why don't you go down and apply for Virginia Beach Police Department and see what you can do, just as a backup plan." So I drove down Bird Neck Avenue, went down to Law Enforcement Training Academy, 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And there was like 3,000 people for 30 spots. I remember calling home saying, "That's it. I'm not going to, this is out of," it was like the deli aisle, right? You pull into the training academy, they hand you a ticket, like when to come back to take your PT test. That's how many people were out there. And so I just kept making it through to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. And one Friday afternoon, I had like 3 months left in the Navy. I got waitlisted on the Seaman Admiral program, and they called me up and they said, "Hey, we're offering your spot in the 36th Virginia Beach Police Academy. And, congratulations." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. Let's go. I'm really waiting on this Navy thing. When do I need to give you an answer?" He said, "I'll give you about 50 minutes. So I called him back, and that's how I became a cop.
Yeah, I've spoken Virginia Beach a couple of times. It's
Yep.
a real pretty city, and it's neat with all the aircraft carriers and that are in Norfolk.
Yeah.
Into it. It's pretty amazing. So, have you even spoke there? Have you spoken?
I sure have. Yeah, multiple times. So I've done Virginia Department of Criminal Justice. I've done the beach. I've done Norfolk at least 2 or 3 times. I got a couple different keynotes that I do. I did some cryptocurrency training down there, undercover narcotics training, and then full keynotes after the book came out.
Man, I think I want to be you when I grow up. You really, and I've been speaking a long time, but you're amazing. I love it, and I think well deserved.
Oh man!
As a police officer in Virginia Beach, and then you didn't have there. I mean, you worked there for quite. Kind of what were the different spaces that you did there with that department?
Yes, I started in Virginia Beach, and I started in patrol, and then made my way over to community-oriented policing, and was only at the beach for about 5 years. And then from Virginia Beach, I made my way up to Keene, New Hampshire, and I was a cop up there for 15 years. So it was a complete turn. I mean, difference of agency, difference of state, difference of the type of police work, whereas like in Virginia Beach, everything's illegal. I mean, you can't curse in public. You can't sit on the sidewalk. It's obstructing free passage. There is city violations for pretty much anything that you want to do in Virginia Beach. Whereas the state motto in New Hampshire is live free or die. So it was a huge contrast between the two, and took quite a toll to figure out what my flow was. But I've always been good with narcotics. I grew up poor, and then I went to a wealthy private high school. Then I was in the military. So I had a lot of different cultural experiences that I think really played into, my world. And again, kind of growing up the way I did, I was always outside. I was always at the basketball courts. I was always hustling something. It just kind of leveled right into being able to speak the lingo. And again, at the private high school that I was at, designer drugs were the name of the game. So it wasn't green weed. It was heroin. It was cocaine. It was, Special K was big at that point. So a lot of, so I learned the packaging, the bindles, the bundles, the points, how to flip money real quick and what that looked like.
Yeah. Before we get to New Hampshire, I'm curious, you were working when you got into narcotics, you
Yep.
embraced the position and you really dove in. And when you did, I know that you talked a little bit about your experience as an undercover officer in Virginia Beach,
Mm-hmm.
and you did talk about a story. First of all, just kind of what was your experience, and what was that like becoming an undercover police officer from being in uniform to that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a whole different world, right? Like whereas you're typically punching a time clock when you're on patrol, you got to hit muster, you got to hit roll call, and then you'll go hit your zone and answer your cars for service. Where it's a little bit more like you're not generating as much, especially in Virginia Beach was different. The calls would come to you. You could be proactive, but it really wasn't that type of place. Whereas, as a UC, you have to kind of develop all your own stuff. You have to develop your own snitches. You have to develop your own work. You have to get online. You got to research who's who. You got to figure out where things are being, where people are getting served up, where your source cities are, where they're coming back, who's the players. And And you got to do that for a lot of different towns and a lot of different, places. And then the biggest thing that you need to do is cultivate younger police officers. And because those are your eyes and ears on the ground. I can't be out there 24/7, 365. So you got to have guys that are texting you 24/7, that are out there on patrol, seeing the things that you need to see. Like, hey, I just saw, this guy and he came out of the Marriott Hotel on Railroad Street, or whatever the case have you. So, but yeah.
Yeah. And so how long in Undercover at Virginia? For quite some time. How big is Virginia? It's a lot bigger than what I thought.
Yeah, Virginia Beach is enormous. Yeah, so it's I think at my time there were about 1,800 sworn.
Yeah.
And so I was only there for just under just to 02 to the end of 07, so just about 5 years.
Okay. So was there a particular incident? Didn't you become really close with somebody on kind of out on, you were about ready to go out on New Year's? And
Yeah. So this is kind of the sad story of really kind of the call that kind of changed my life, and for good and bad. But it's a pretty terrible story in and of itself. So like I said, I was stationed down in Mayport, Florida, and and when I moved up to Virginia Beach to become a cop up there, it was Christmas Eve of 2003. And at this time I was the youngest guy in the undercover world. So I drew the short straw because you're the young badge. And I was going out to this place in what's called Lake Edwards, which is Section 8 housing. And as I drove out there, on the right side, playing in the front lawn with this little boy, was a buddy of mine from the Navy. So, I kind of did a double take. I'm like, is that really him? So I pulled over. I'm like, yo, man, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. We chopped it up for a second. He's like, meet my son. This is Benny Jr. He's 2.5 years old. I'm like, nice to meet you, Benny. And I said, what, did you get stationed up here in Norfolk? He said, yeah. And he said, please don't tell me you're a cop. I said, I am. He's like, I don't know how you made it through the whole process, but, and he said, come on inside, man. You got to meet my wife. I'm married now. I got a 6-month-old. And, so I went inside. I met Brittany. I met a 6-month-old. And, he said, what are you doing for Christmas tomorrow? And I said, I got to work. I'm a young badge. And he said, well, dude, I got my whole family coming up here, man. Why don't you swing by, get you a plate, eat some food, meet the family. And I'm like, great, man. I'm literally four houses down, like 4 blocks down. And what I was doing was just, at this time, you could write down license plates, you could do trash pulls, you could do, a lot of different techniques in order to get a paper on the house. And so I did. I remember going over for Christmas. We had a great time. I got to meet, his father. I got to meet Brittany's grandfather. And there was just a whole bunch of people there. And, I always remember going into the kitchen at one point. It's like this galley style kitchen. And there was little Benny Jr. He was up on this step stool and he was cutting up Christmas cookies. And he turned and he said, and just as he turned, his head was kind of like right at my gun and his eyes were bulging out. And he said, oh my God, he's like, are you a police officer? In that little 2.5-year-old stuttered voice. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, man, that is so cool. And, and I always hold on to that because the brightness of his face when he looked at me, when he said that, it was just, I just hold it in my heart. And, I continued on that day, went back to work after that. And then about, 6 days later, my whole world changed. And everything that I thought I knew, I didn't know anymore. And everything I thought I knew about faith, everything I thought I knew about life, everything I thought I knew about who I was, it all changed. And I woke up on New Year's Eve of 03 going into 04. And, Jason, I remember being excited about it. Most of the time in the military, we were out to sea or you were on base or you were standing duty or something. So you never really got, never really got like a true New Year's Eve, but I got a true New Year's Eve and I was going out with the fellas that night. We were going to, it was going to be great. Like we were excited. I had an outfit planned out for it, and I had about an hour and a half left of my shift. I was right around the corner from Ben and Brittany's house, and right about 4:30, the call came out. And, at this time they would tone you out for a hot call. And so the tones came out, doo, 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 doo. And I remember kind of listening in and I heard units 325, units 326 respond to 767 Hampshire Lane, a 2.5-year-old code gray. And I remember thinking as the initial tone came out, I said, oh man, I was like, that's a really shitty call for New Year's Eve. Code gray is unconscious, not breathing. And then the second time it came out, 767 Hampshire Lane, 2.5-year-old code gray, just kind of sat there. And it was almost kind of like, just kind of processing the call. I wasn't a zone unit. Like I said, I was around the corner writing down license plates for a trap house, and 20 seconds went by, 30 seconds went by. And then, man, it was like a Mike Tyson left hook. That beautiful little baby that had just given me a Christmas cookie. That was 767 Hampshire Lane, and that was my buddy Ben. And it just dawned on me after about 30 seconds of sitting in my car. So I jumped the car into drive. I was 4 blocks away. I drove up onto the front lawn, and Brittany is standing there screaming. Ben had to go back out to see. So she's screaming with the baby in her arms. So I go running inside, and she had taken the 6-month-old, man, and she had went into the bathroom to take a shower, and she put on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And Benny Jr., just kind of being the little monkey that he is, he climbed up on the windowsill, kind of like the windowsill right here behind me, and he grabbed the blind cord and he went to go swing from the windowsill onto the dresser. And at this time, they still had the blind cords that didn't separate, that you had to pull down either side, and it caught him right around the neck. And as I didn't know what was happening. To be honest, I didn't really know. Like, Brittany was screaming at the top of her lungs, and like I thought like there was a burglar. I thought maybe like there was a dead animal. Like there were so many things. Like, your brain starts to trick you. Do you know what I mean? Like, I heard the call, but like when you go in there, you don't really. It's like she's pointing in the bedroom. So anyway, I get right to work. I had a knife on my cargo pants. I pulled it out. I cut Benny down, and I just started doing CPR. I grew up Irish Catholic in New Jersey. Every Sunday we went to church. Every night we said our prayers before we went to bed. And, I remember I never really asked God for anything in my life up until this point. And, I'm doing CPR, and I'm like, please, God, don't do this, man. Please, please, Lord, do not take this little boy from me. And, I was doing my compressions. I was doing my rescue breaths, doing my compression, doing my rescue breath. Brittany's screaming behind me, save my firecracker, Matt, save my firecracker, Matt. And I didn't know this, but Benny was born on the 4th of July. So she's screaming that. And I felt like, the world was crashing in, but I just kept praying like, God, don't do this. And on my second rescue breath, I got this breath, and it was kind of like a whew, and right into my mouth. And I remember the relief that I felt. And I was like, oh, thank you, God. I knew if I prayed, I knew that you would be here. I knew that you would come down here and you would save this little boy. And unfortunately, unbeknownst to me, that was the last breath that Benny Jr. ever took. And he took it right into my mouth. And I kept going. I knew at that point, though, that he was gone. That was the point where I knew that, there was he had gone wherever he was going to go. And EMS arrived on scene. They could see me sweating and everything else. So they pushed me off. And as they pushed me off, I could see on the wall where he had these scratch marks of him trying to get down. It was just a 2.5-year-old little boy. And man, I'm telling you, it hit me real hard, Jason. It hit me from a faith perspective. It hit me because my own son was just about that age and looked very similar. And, and who was I going to say? Who was I going to tell, hey, I just sat in my car around the corner for 30 seconds. I felt like it was my fault. I felt like I could have saved this little boy. Like, I got a breath. Imagine if I got here 30 seconds sooner. Like, why the fuck did I stay in my car at a trap house? Why didn't I just go to this call, and I just, man, it hit me real hard. And, unfortunately, Ben Sr. was out to sea. He had to go do a workup. So Brittany, and everything, like, we went to the hospital, they pronounced him at the hospital. And so, like, I stayed with Brittany for the better part of the night for New Year's Eve. And she just said, hey, Griff, can you, is there any chance that you can just stay and help us until Ben gets back? And I said, of course, whatever you need. And, a couple of nights later, maybe in the next night or the night after, we were at the funeral home, and Brittany asked me to dress Benny Jr. in a Spider-Man outfit, and she had to take a call. So here I am, left in the room with little Benny Jr., 2.5 years old, and I'm dressing him in a Spider-Man costume, man, and I'm just sobbing. I'm just telling him, I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry that who cares about marijuana? That's illegal now, but I'm staying at this house, instead of going to the call and doing what I should have done. So,
thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah,
man, it's still, and listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not he speaks on this a lot. Okay. So, but it's moving, and it is a worst nightmare. And for him, I think you talked about it, how you have disappointment in yourself for sitting there and waiting in your mind, which really, talk about it and how you kind of blame yourself in this kind of
100%. Yeah. And I think we all have that, and you don't have to be a cop to have that thing that you regret, to have that thing that you look at and wish you would have made a left turn instead of a right turn. Like car accidents are like that. Jobs are like that. People are like that. There's always that thing that we regret, or we wish we would have done a little bit better. And, and unfortunately for me, I felt like this was my catastrophic failure moment. And, for the most part, military and cops, we don't have that catastrophic failure. Like the worst day for me was not making an arrest, or, an arrest I did make get thrown out in court, but that's not catastrophic. But this was a little beautiful baby's life that was no longer going to be on this planet because of a decision I made. Yeah. And there's, I felt like I let him down, and, and it's just, oh man, it and then, we don't debrief, we don't talk about it. We don't, so the only, like, I kept having nightmares every single night. Like I just, like I would wake up and I would, Benny Jr.'s face would look up at me, or I would, I couldn't find the house, or like all these different things. And so, for me, I didn't know how to live after that. And so the only way I could get a good night's sleep was coping with alcohol. And, that led to making bad decisions, and, just not being the switched on, faithful guy that I was.
Yeah. So your career with Virginia Beach, you were kind of talk a little bit about how marriage was at this point. You're kind of, at some point in time, didn't your wife come to you and she was like, "Hey, we need to change"?
Yeah, she said.
Because I'm thinking, and what the heck drew to New Hampshire of all places?
Yeah, the only way you land in New Hampshire, I thought New Hampshire was in like the Midwest, So, but my ex-wife, my boy's mother, her family was up here in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, and I couldn't get a job in Massachusetts because you have to be in civil service. But my ex-wife had came to me and she said, "Baby, you're not right. Let's get you a change. Let's start fresh. Let's get up by my family, whatnot." And so that's what we did, and I started brand new and in a small town called Keene, New Hampshire, where's exactly where I'm sitting right now in my house in Keene, New Hampshire.
You get a job with the police department. Was that your original goal, to go there to be on the police department?
Yeah. So there's two places. I looked at Manchester. Manchester, New Hampshire was very urban. And then I drove from Manchester and drove south down to Keene. And Keene is like quintessential New England town. I'm talking like everybody's happy. People are like frolicking in the grass. Like you'd ask me, like, "How's Keene?" "Oh, it's a great place to raise kids. It's beautiful here. There's no crime rate." Like it was, I'm like, is this a cult? Like, is the town a cult? But it wasn't.
It's like Norman Rockwell, right?
That's it.
There's stuff from Norman Rockwell from that town, right?
100%. Yep. Yeah. Jumanji was filmed in Keene, New Hampshire. And so the downtown where all the animals are running, that's Keene, New Hampshire. That's our central square. So a little bit of history there. But yeah, and I got right in. And you know what? And I was burned out. I didn't want to run and gun. I didn't want to make a whole bunch of arrests. I didn't want to do anything crazy. So I became the SRO at our local high school, and I loved every minute of it. I was a lacrosse player. I played in adult leagues, and then I wound up coaching the the high school team. So it was great. It was a great call for me right up until the opioid epidemic came out. And, the thing about New Hampshire is everybody knows each other. They all went to high school together. Everybody, they're friends or friends of friends, family members. And so the chief came to me and he said, "Would you be interested in going undercover?" And, he made a pretty good offer. He said, "Well, you can either go back to midnights, your 4 years are up at the high school, or you can go undercover." And, I chose to go undercover.
Yeah. It was, in a town like that, did you live in the town at the time?
Yeah. So the way it works is like your TAD from your local agency to what's called the Drug Task Force. And so we were a conglomerate of about 12 guys from all over New Hampshire. And so we took care of New Hampshire, Massachusetts. So we were TAD all over the place, man. So it was really, So I wouldn't basically say you don't shit where you eat. So like, I wouldn't do deals in my hometown. Whereas like I was a primary undercover for a lot of others. So basically like we had guys that were better on surveillance. We had guys that were good at running snitches. But we also had guys that could handle themselves inside of, high risk situations. And so that was really what I specialized in was going in and buying dope and being comfortable in that situation.
Yeah, I think that you would stand out already because they have an accent up there and you really don't. Not like that accent,
Right.
Unless you were able to replicate it somehow, like you were a local. But I mean, I would think that even though Hampshire, it's not a huge state, but it's not a tiny state,
Yeah.
but it's small. I mean, you would think that people would be like, "Hey, man, do you know this guy?"
Yeah.
And somebody that knows somebody somewhere in that state,
Yeah.
So I think that would add a level of complexity, really in some ways. So you'd always have to keep your head on a swivel. So
yeah, you do. And the thing is, like, we would go into mess, and a lot of times it's just such a revolving door. And like, that's the thing about the cartel, right? Like, they're 18 months and it's a turnover. Your capos and like your leading lieutenants of like, no matter what set it is, whether it's Sinaloa's, whether it's, whatever set it is, they're gonna flip over. They're gonna turn over every about 18 months to 2 years. And so you're gonna have different people, and they're always trying to figure out how to make as much money as quick as possible. And so, for them, it was like, whatever, we don't care. Like, if the bearded guy knows his money's right and he keeps coming down here and he keeps wanting to buy more, we're gonna keep selling it to him.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We're gonna get into some really stuff here in a minute. I wanted to at least give a shout out to a few people that have joined us. A Mays, I love this guy too. That's why I don't bring on people that I don't love, that aren't just making it. And he is certainly Vic White. Vic retired from the California Highway Patrol, the police academy. My dad. Thanks for being here, Vic. I don't know you in here. You're not as much as you need to, but thanks for being here. Clark, I appreciate you being here. April Woods, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're visiting with Matt, and Matt's talking about his journey, and it's an incredible journey. And Matt is somebody that speaks all over the country. Matt Griffin. He spent time as an undercover police officer, not only at Virginia Beach, Virginia, but also Keene, New Hampshire. And he's done a couple of other things like, we share a little bit in that world. I was an undercover cop too, believe it or not. And I was a school resource officer. And
Yes.
they're both interesting jobs. Believe me, I've always said this about being an SRO. I think it's one of the more rewarding jobs in the world of policing, and it really is, because you have an opportunity to really mold people and for them to get to know who you are as a cop, but anyway, so there's his website, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're interested in more about him, I encourage you to do that. Hey, Okie and Daryl Case, I appreciate you being here as well. So you go there, and how's your marriage at this point? You uproot from Virginia Beach. Now you come to Keene, where her family's from. Yeah. How was your life? What was going on in your world? Because you just came from a huge department.
Yeah.
What's your identity?
Yep. It really slowed down, to be honest with you. And I really liked it. It was, I didn't have to think a lot about Benny Jr. I didn't have to think a lot about faith. I didn't have to really kind of put, those things together. And so things really kind of just slowed down for me. The biggest thing that I had was cyberbullying at my local high school. So, that was the majority of my time. Most of the time I loved going into the high school, because at the end of the day, I had lacrosse practice with kids that loved to learn from me, and we had good quality kids. And, so I really enjoyed it. And then, when the time came, a lot of people don't understand when you go undercover. So when I moved up to Keene, I never had overtime work. I never had detail work. Virginia Beach, they don't have that. So you don't have, like, your base pay is your base pay. That's it. That's all you get. So when I moved up to New Hampshire, what happened was they're like, hey, you want to go to the overtime draw? I said, well, what's the overtime draw? It's, well, you can get extra shifts. You can get paid $75 an hour to be a security guard at the football game on Friday night. I'm like, really? And so I'm signing up for overtime. My wife became a stay-at-home mom, and we had another child, and so I was making probably 25-30% over my pay in overtime, and just everybody did. You always had shifts. You always had extra, vacation shifts. And so, when you go undercover, you lose all that. You can't work those shifts. I can't put on a uniform. I had cornrows in my hair. I had a lip ring. I had tattoos all over my legs and my arms. And, and I just looked the part. I looked like I was a biker. I looked like, I was a bad dude. And so you can't really put on a uniform and take a road detail. Can't really direct traffic and make that $75 anymore. And, but it was a tough decision. And a lot of people ask me if I would go back and make that same decision. And I think, I prayed a lot about this. I think if I had to go back, I would change my decision. I would change my decision and I would stay. I wouldn't go undercover. It took such a toll on me. And I just don't think mentally I was ready for it. And, what I mean by that is I was still really kind of beat up internally and in my head about Benny Jr. and really wasn't at a right place, with my faith or with who I was. And so, and it led to, yeah, there we go. And the funny part is if you look at my blonde hair, so, dudes don't read the bottle, and a lot of the women on here can appreciate this. So I decided I was going to finish. Yeah. So I finished my undercover op with the cornrows. And I went to Walmart to dye my hair. And so I put the dye in my hair, but I didn't read the back of the bottle. And so I left it in it was supposed to be like 5 minutes, but I had it in for like 40 minutes. I'm like, man, my scalp is burning. So that's how it turned to orange right there. So it was supposed to be like dirty blonde.
I used to do sun in when I was a high schooler,
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
So it just,
but that's natural because that's actually pretty good because, they're thinking, yeah, what kind of,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and then, we're just running and gunning. No kidding. Definitely no kidding. My scalp burned for about 4 days after that. So, so we're just running and gunning. And I remember, there's so many rules in the undercover world, and drug dealers don't have those same rules. We had to have certain number of surveillance guys before we could get a buy done. We had to do all this paperwork before we could go into a certain place. If we changed locations more than 2 times, the deal was done. And so we had all of these different rules. And I remember I'd served a search warrant and I got, a decent amount of dope, and I was pretty proud of it. And I rolled into a bar on a Friday afternoon and have a burger and a beer. And I sat at the end stool, and I knew the owner. And I remember the door opening up and dude started walking in, and he kind of turned and walked right towards me. And I didn't know him. So I kind of shuffled my chair back a little bit and I balled myself up ready to launch at him if I needed to. And he said, hey, you're Matt Griffin, right? That undercover cop. And being a smart ass, I said, well, I guess not so undercover. And he said, what are you doing here on a Friday? I said, man, I'm having a burger and a beer. And he said, well, maybe if you weren't, my son wouldn't have passed away last night from an opioid overdose. And I remember how that hit me. I thought to myself, like, why am I here? Like, why am I here on a Friday afternoon? And why, and so I got my check and that kind of, it's almost like that was a straw that broke the camel's back inside of me. And I just started hustling. Like I played by the rules and everything that I always did, but it was like, man, I just never stopped. I never turned off CJ Davis. Like that was my undercover name. I was CJ Davis 24/7 and really forgot how to be Matt Griffin and really didn't want to be Matt Griffin. It was all about CJ and making this who I was. And to be honest with you, like CJ Davis became my main personality, and Matt Griffin, the father and the husband, was a backup for that 10% of the week that I had to. And as you can imagine, that took a toll on everything.
Yeah, and I think undercover work back then was a lot different than it is today. Back then, when I was doing it as well, I mean, I was in motel rooms buying crack cocaine and by myself. I mean, they were listening. They were out maybe watching from around the corner in the parking lot. I was in very dangerous things, and I'm sure you were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Living we living like Billy Queen, these other guys that were
deep. I mean, those are the OGs. And in Montana, I got to meet Lou Velassi, who's just he's always been kind of a mentor and idol for me. Yeah. So got to hang out with him a little bit, and that was pretty cool. Yeah. But yeah, and at this time, things started to really kind of fall apart in my life. As you can imagine, I wasn't being a husband, I wasn't being a father, I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do, and I think that really escalated a lot and I just kind of lost rationale and emotional intelligence, if that makes sense. Like I just felt like I was, I don't want to say I was out of my mind, but I was very dangerous, and I was ready for it. I was ready to get in a gunfight. And, to be honest with you, I felt like that was needed. Like I would go in to buy dope, and Mr. Big would be sitting right there with his gun guy or whoever he had, and his guy would just be staring at me. I'm like, go ahead, man, go ahead. Pull your gun. If you think you're going to pull your gun faster than I can pull my gun, then do it and see what happens. See if you think you're better than me. And like I would challenge these guys in the middle of a set trying to get served up, and I mean, it got me a reputation of being a little bit crazy, and I wouldn't get checked as much. But at the same time, it was just a very, very dangerous, risky lifestyle, and without a lot of oversight, to be honest with you. Like I would run and gun no matter where it was,
Yeah. It's, yeah, that's crazy. I'll tell you what, so you went on from there, and your marriage is struggling at this point.
Yeah.
How old are your kids at this point?
So I have, geez, that's a tough question because I got 4 of them. That's a lot of math. So I think my youngest one is about 3 or 4 years old, 2 or 3 years old, maybe somewhere around 2 to 4. And so, I was doing an undercover. I was gone for about 2 weeks down in Rhode Island, and I missed my wife's birthday. I was on my way home, and as I was driving, I wasn't in the right headspace, and I called her at about 11 a.m. and this is the summer of 2016, and she said, "You forgot my birthday." And I said, no, and I tried to undercover it. I just tried to hustle it, and she said, "No, you forgot my birthday." And I said, "Yeah, I did." And I got home, and I brought some Chinese food and some flowers, and it turned into a pretty violent affair where the flowers got smashed and the Chinese food went all over the place. And that was the point where, like, I felt like, and I was being that alpha male, and I didn't realize what I was doing to my family. And I was too busy looking in the mirror and looking at the community and not taking care of, what my first priority is, which is my family. And, I was like, I got mad at my wife at the time. I said, "I'm doing something great out here. Like I'm getting kilos of fentanyl at the street. People are dying left and right. Like, why are you doing this to me?" And so I wound up leaving. And, as it went on, we just the turmoil. I think anybody can resonate with, with a divorce. We had been together for 15, going on 15 years. We were together for 18 years. We got married while I was in the Navy, and she had put up with a lot. And you have all of these dreams and all these things, and that's all gone now. And it was just a whirlwind. So, I wound up staying in a 1-bedroom apartment. I was homeless for a little bit. And it was just
broke.
Yeah, broke, man. I remember I had my son, and I just had the 2 younger ones, and my third child. He said, "Hey, Daddy, any chance we can have something other than ramen noodles tonight?" I said, "Yeah, of course, man, of course." And I walked down to the ATM. I put my ATM card in there, and I was trying to pulse out like $20 so I could get some pizza and in like a 2-liter. And I remember it spitting my card back out, and I took the receipt, and the receipt said $1.13, and I stared at that for the entire walk back home to my apartment. And I've never felt so low as when I came back into the house, and I told my kids, I said, "Hey guys, we got to do ramen again tonight. I'm sorry, man, but maybe next week." And I kept a picture of that receipt for a long time, and as a matter of fact, I still have it. It's one of the first slides that I show. It's just where I came from. And my divorce was finalized on January 5th of 2017. And, I just remember crying, man. And I have no problem saying that. I just sat in my Yukon on January 5th, and I was just crying, man. I just, the picture of life that I thought, you come into this job, whether it's, police or military or whatever it is, and like your goal is to get to your pension. And now all that's gone. Like every vision I had for my life was gone. I felt like I was failing my children because I can't feed them. I felt like I failed my wife because I wasn't a good husband. I feel like I'm failing my community because, I'm not doing the things that I need to do because I'm too chaotic with my divorce going on. And, March 9th came, and I woke up. March 9th would have been my 15-year wedding anniversary. And, anybody can resonate with the day that you wake up and you're like, man, today's just going to suck. You stub your toe, spill your coffee. Yeah, I just had a lot of feelings. It was just I had all the feels going on that day. But one of the things that we try to do, or at least I tried to do, was always find a way to be successful. And for me, that was at work. And so I had a prostitution sting going on that day. I got into work and we're briefing up, and right about 9 o'clock, somebody knocks on the door and it says, "Hey man, Chief wants to see you." I'm like, "Damn, we're briefing up right now." And I said, "Can I go?" They said, "Just go down there." So I walked down there. Now the chief is a good friend of mine, and he had promoted out of the undercover world and became the chief of police of our small town. So I knock on the door and I was like, "Hey man." And he said, "Griff, have a seat." And now I'm kind of freaking out, right? Anybody can, if your boss tells you have a seat, you're trying to run, what's going on. So I didn't know if this was Brian and Matt time. I didn't know if something had happened and, he needed to be chief detective. But so I'm kind of feeling it out. And he said to me, "You know what today is?" Referring to what would have been my 15-year wedding anniversary. And I remember, I just kind of stopped in my tracks. This man had listened to me that March 9th was going to be a shitty day for me, had written it down someplace to check on me on March 9th. And I always bring that with me everywhere I go. The ability to write down, number one, the ability to listen, because people will tell you their dates. And second, the ability to follow up on that. And he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, man, I'm good. I'm straight." He said, "Griff, you got a lot of people that are relying on you to do your job out here. And if you're not mentally prepared, you're not physically ready, tell me now. I will comp you out for free and I'll have somebody else lead the operation." And, I sat there and I looked at him. I said, "I'm good, man. I'm straight." And he had this way of raising an eyebrow. So he raised an eyebrow at me and I stood up and I said, "We good?" He said, "Yep." And I walked out. You know what I didn't say? I didn't say, "How are you?"
Yeah.
I didn't say to him, "Hey man, after this operation today, why don't we go chop it up and have a cold beer?" And
were you
Hmm?
were you when he asked you, telling him you were okay, or were you really okay?
No, I wasn't okay, but I wasn't going to
Yeah.
say anything,
Sure.
And yeah, so as I went to walk out, man, I didn't say to him, "Are you okay?" I didn't say to him, "Hey, I know today might be a bad day for you as well. Why don't we go get a cold one?" And unfortunately, 2 hours later, he went home, shot, and killed himself. And man, that one eats me up, man. It really does. It eats me up because I feel I still, to this day, I feel like I had a shot at saying to him, "Hey, let's go grab a cold one after this, man." And you know, yeah, and over the next couple of days, that was March 9th of 2017. Over the next couple of days, I just didn't, it didn't resonate with me. In the military and the police department, like suicide's weak. It's so weak, it's so weak that, don't leave, like all of these weak acronyms related to suicide. But like for the life of me, I couldn't understand it. And it didn't make sense now, because Brian wasn't weak, man. Like there was nothing weak about this man. He was 5'9", 240 pounds of muscle. He would cauliflower ears. Like he was a bad dude. He was just a bad man. And there was nothing weak about him. And the thing was, like, how could suicide be weak? Brian committed suicide. He's not weak. So it didn't make sense to me. And, I kept going back and forth, man, in my head. And I failed Benny Jr. I'm failing my kids. I'm failing my wife. I'm failing my community. I'm failing. Now Brian is not here because of me. And all of a sudden it hit, man. And it was a trauma, and it changed the way I looked at suicide. And it changed me from looking at suicide as being suicide to it being a sacrifice. And I decided that I needed to sacrifice myself. And on March 17th, I decided that I was done. And I was done with this world. And the trauma had taken over. And I woke up that morning and I decided I was going to write my suicide note. Still have it right here in my head. I can rehearse the entire thing. And I just, to my sons, you won't understand. I know this, but please understand that I love you more than anything. You are my light in bad times and my sunshine every morning. And goes on for another paragraph. Well, I was pretty evil to my ex-wife, and then another paragraph of, just how I was feeling. And the thing was, I didn't want to fail anybody anymore. And that's what people don't realize about suicide is they just think that oh, like it's the easy way out, right? Like I hear it all the time. It's a temporary solution or it's a or the the slogan, right? It's a final solution to a temporary problem. But the thing is, that's not the way somebody that has that trauma is looking at it. Like I was not looking at it as a solution. I was looking at it as the next level of my sacrifice to my children, to my community. And if you look back, everything I've ever done in my life was a sacrifice. I went to a high school I didn't want to go to. I served my country. I became a SAR swimmer because my buddy next to me, wanted to be a SAR swimmer. And then I went to the police department because my brother said that's a great next step. Everything I'd done was a sacrifice, and now it's my time to finish what I started. And that's kind of the way I looked at it. And I don't know why, but I decided that I was going to clean up my apartment. So I cleaned up my apartment. Apparently, I cared what people were going to think about my apartment. And then I wrote down all my accounts and my passwords. I just felt like I was going to make it easy. Not that there was a lot of money in there, but like I just figured I'd make it easy. And I remember my last meal, man. I remember what I thought was going to be my last meal was two slices of pepperoni pizza and a Pepsi, and from a place called Amici's. And I remember each bite. Man, like it's something that I don't even know why I said that, man. I really haven't, I really don't say that when I speak, but maybe somebody on here needs to. Maybe pepperoni pizza means something to somebody else, but I had 2 slices of pepperoni pizza and just kind of felt God telling me to tell that story for whatever reason. But went out, sat in my car at about 10:30 p.m. I decided that I was going to take my life in my car. I just figured I'd make it cleaner and easier. And, I started thinking about who was going to find me, whose brain was I going to be burned into, like so many others have been burned into my brain. And I decided that midnight was my time, that the zeros on the clock just felt right and they felt good. And it felt like that was my time. It was my time to finish what I started and to sacrifice myself and, to let my children live a great life. And unfortunately, that's the trauma. That wasn't a rational brain. That's the trauma speaking. And, man, God's so good, man. I mean, I just, all glory and honor goes to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because, at 11, so let's rewind the clock, right? I had $1.13 in my checking account, and I have that receipt, and we can put it up on here, or I can send it to you guys. But I had my receipt, $1.13 in my checking account. At 11:13 p.m., my phone rings. Now let me back up. I got my Yukon at about 10:30. I started listening to the music of my life. I have my gun and my suicide note, and I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. What I didn't know is that if you call twice inside of a minute, it breaks through the Do Not Disturb. So my buddy Ben, not Ben that's in the Navy, not Benny Jr.'s father, but Ben, who's still my best friend to this day and a cop here in Keene, New Hampshire. He calls the first time because it's St. Patty's Day, and then he forgot to leave a message. So he immediately calls back, and it breaks right through. My phone rings, and I pick it up. And he said, "Yo, dude, I've been trying to get a hold of you all day." And I said, "Yeah, man." And he said, "Why don't you come over and have a cold one with me?" And I said, "Ben, I got something I got to take care of tonight. How about tomorrow, pal?" And he said, now Ben's not an I love you guy. Like, I'm going to love you guy. I'll tell everybody on here that I love you, and I love that you're here, and I love that you're listening to this, and I hope that this helps somebody go through whatever they're going through. But Ben's not that. He said, "Hey, before I let you go, can I tell you 2 things?" I said, "Sure, bro." He said, "Number 1, man, I want to tell you that I love you. You're a good man. You're a great friend." And he said, "Number 2, I want to tell you that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And as you're going through this time, I want to walk with you." And at 11:15 p.m., I made the best decision of my life. I said, if today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And I said, "You know what, Ben, I'm going to come over and have that beer with you." Because there's nothing for me about March 17th. It wasn't like, oh, this is St. Patty's Day. This is the day. It was just I woke up and I was done with life. And I said, "You know what? Today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow." So I went over and I had a beer with Ben. I woke up on March 18th, and I went through my whole process again. And so, you know what? If today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And on March 19th, And then I pushed it to March 20th, then to March 21st. And every day I decided that if today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And I made it 24 hours. And I would celebrate that 24 hours. And then after about a month or so of being suicidal every day, I decided that I didn't need it anymore. And I decided that I was going to do something good for myself. And I liked the way the 24-hour thing resonated with me. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like I didn't have to look forward to 6 months from now. I didn't have to try and figure out my pension or what I was going to do afterward. Like, it was just 24 hours by 24 hours by 24 hours. That's all I needed to worry about. It was just a 24-hour period. And then I changed it to, I would wake up and say, all right, how about I do something good for myself? So for the next 6 months, every day I wake up and I would say to myself, all right, I'm going to do something good. And sometimes it was get out of bed. Sometimes go to the gym. Sometimes it was read a book. Sometimes I cannot make this up. I booked a cruise for 2 years down the road just so I had something to look forward to. And, that saved my life. And right around November of 2017, I decided.
Hey, can I ask you real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
A quick question, real quick.
Yeah.
I don't want to get you off track.
No.
Did you ever tell your friend how close you were?
Yeah, he found out about 6, 7, 8 months later. Yeah. And what's so special about him to this day, man? Like, he's just a great friend. That's the only thing that I can say, man. He's just a great friend. I remember when I needed a place to stay. He's got a wife and he's got 2 kids at home, and I remember calling him like, "Hey, man, I need a place to crash." It was never like, "Hey, let me ask my wife. Let me call you right back and make sure we're good." And there was never ever, "Get over here, Paul. Like, you're family to me." And that's how he's always treated me. And he's been that for me my whole life, man. And as long as I've known him, and I think somebody said that, it was divine intervention and he was my angel. Ben's been my angel. I mean, if you think about it, right? Like, how many coincidences of Ben's in my life, right? And, there's a lot of biblical, reasons I think for that. But, and so right around November, I changed it one more time. And in November of 2017, I changed it to the motto that I live with every single day, including today. And that motto is every 24-hour period I find an opportunity to do something good for somebody else. And that's what I've done for the last 9+ years, is every 24-hour period. And here's the deal with it, right? So there's some guide rails to it, or some guardrails. And here's the guardrails to it. What I learned is that if you focus on doing something good for somebody else, the goodness comes back to you. And here's why. So as a cop, I focused on negativity. I was very cynical. I was very negative. I found the negative in everything, right? But when I focus on positivity, guess what happens? Positive comes back to me. So when I find positive people, I gravitate towards them. Positive people are going to build back into your life in a positive way, right? Goodness always wins.
Yeah.
And like, I'm going to say that one more time, like, goodness always wins. And it's called neuroplasticity. When you guys go to, to go buy a car and you're looking at an Escalade. Guess what you see all day? You see Escalades. As dope cops, when we would go out to go find dope, guess what we'd find? We'd find dope because we're looking for it. Guess what happens when you go out and you're trying to find goodness? You find goodness, and that goodness comes back to you. And it's scientific. They call it neuroplasticity. It's pretty badass, and and it's pretty amazing how it works. And so I've done that. But the other guardrail to it is you can't speak about it. I can't come on here and tell you what I did for, my good deed was today, because the Lord says you surely received your reward in full if you do that. And so every single night I journal what my good deed was. So guess what I just did at nighttime, right? I just spent another 5-10 minutes focusing on the goodness that I was able to have for the day. When I woke up in the morning, the left foot hit the ground. I said, thank. The right foot hit the ground. I said, you. And I would thank God for another day. And I would ask God, all right, who is it going to be today? Who's it going to be today? Who are you going to put in my path that needs a little bit of my light, that needs a little bit of my energy, that needs a little bit of positivity? And I would wait for it all day long. And so all I'm doing is focusing on good. And I've watched how that positivity come back. I had $1.13 in my checking account, and I'm sitting here on this show with you 9 years to this day. I mean, that's just a testament to goodness. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't want to miss out on the part where, within about a week after this deal, you were at a class.
Yeah.
And I know that guy. I know Byron Boston.
Yeah.
Talk about that, because that kind of changed the trajectory of your life.
Man.
Right?
So I fell in love with Jesus Christ a couple of years prior to this. And after Benny Jr., I decided that I wanted to research faith, man. Jesus either lived or walked or didn't, and I had to figure it out. I wanted to be the detective about it. So obviously, as you guys can have seen through the course of my time here, like I fell on the side of faith. And so at the end of 2017, again, I didn't have a lot of money. And so I had set up a class called Fighting Fentanyl. I was one of the primary undercover cops with fentanyl when fentanyl was brand new, New Hampshire and Ohio, like 2 leading states. So everybody was calling me like, hey, what do we do with fentanyl? How do we field test it? What do we do with it? So what I did was I saw an obstacle and I created an opportunity for myself. I created a 2-day class called Fighting Fentanyl. I had a 2-day class in Hampton, New Hampshire. I had 30 people. It was sold out at $275 a person. I did everything right. I had my secondary employment approved by my police department. I had my leave chit in for the 2 days. And on Friday before that, the new chief of police, who can't stand me, doesn't like drug work, comes in and says, Matt, we're canceling your leave for Monday and Tuesday. I said, you can't do that. I said, I got guys coming from all over the country for this class. I was going to make about 15 grand and I didn't have really a pot to piss in. And I said, why are you canceling my leave? He said, you have a subpoena for a prostitution case that got continued. I said, Chief, I'm not going to be there. And he said, well, that's a decision that you're going to have to make. I said, oh, I'm going to tell you that's my decision right now. And I went to my class. And on Tuesday night, when I came back from my class, I was praying about it. And I say, all right, God, if this is my time, this is my time. And I heard God say to me, if you get called in there, you're done. And I said, all right. And I'm going to trust. So I wrote, I don't want to steal it. So the next day I go in on Wednesday morning, I'm sitting there at my desk and sure enough, the phone rings. And they said, Matt, your presence is requested in the Chiefs conference room. I took a deep breath. I stood up. I walked to the Chiefs conference room. I walk in and for those of you who don't know, you have these things called Garrity rights. They're kind of like Miranda rights for a police officer when you're involved in an internal. And so as I walk in, it's the chief, my buddy, another guy that I don't like, and then another buddy. So there's 4 people. And the chief stands up. I'm standing up. He said, Matt, we want to first start by reading you your Garrity rights. And I said, Chief, can I stop you for a second? He said, sure. I said, Chief, when I came here from Keene, New Hampshire, or when I came here from Virginia Beach, I was a bike cop. I made more arrests than anybody that had ever been made. Then you asked me to go to the SRO. I went to the SRO. I wrote the cyberbully policy for the state of New Hampshire. I was the head lacrosse coach. I brought them to the semifinals of the state championship. I said, then you asked me to do DUIs for 9 months. I did 90 DUIs in 9 months. I got an award for it. I said, you asked me to go undercover. I still have the top 2 largest seizures for fentanyl. I said, Chief, can I ask you a question now? I said, how many guys are we down? How many openings do we have at Keene? He said, I think we got 7. I reached in my pocket. I pulled out my 7-day or my 2-week notice, slammed it on the table. I said, well, now you're 8. And I walked out.
That must have been really tough. But then again, probably liberating, dude, to some extent.
Brother, when I tell you, I was like, holy crap, what did I just do? I remember walking out of the police department down the long hallway. It was about a 30-second walk. And I'm like, I just quit my job. I just quit my job. And
they didn't come after you, did they?
No, they didn't. I sat in my Yukon, same Yukon that about 9 months prior almost took my life. And I said, okay, God, well, I listened. And that's how I got hooked up with Byron and began teaching for professional law enforcement training and telling my story about Brian and suicide and overcoming trauma, and led to my first book, The Journey to Midnight, which became a bestseller.
Not just a bestseller, a 4-time bestseller.
Yeah.
And The Journey to Midnight. It is. Well, I'll tell you what, it's a good book. And the moment after I heard you speak, well, first of all, I know Byron Boston. I actually got hired by him too, about the same, probably before you did. And it just didn't take off. We didn't get enough interest. He asked me what size polo did I wear too. And so I was like, I was disappointed. Still, maybe one day who knows? I haven't talked to him in a long time, but what an epic opportunity that you had. And you basically embraced it, and you were getting sent to the country, and he pays pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So you were going all over the place.
Yeah.
So
And I just, and I was listening to God's word, man. I was fully surrendered to what he wanted. And I just decided that every class, no matter what class I taught, I would end with a story about Brian and I, and how I could train you how to be an undercover cop and how to be safe. But at the end of the day, the number one leading cause of death is suicide. And that was my passion. It's been my passion ever since. And that's, I wrote the Journey to Midnight out of my own healing. And thanks, Karen. I wrote my journey out of my own healing, and I had no idea that it was going to go like that. And
what made you do this? I mean, what was it about you had this? I talked about it because I've picked your brain. How did you write? And you told me, you said the chapter, you started writing one, but you said break it up. But what was it about this that you just said, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write a book and share this, because this is huge.
Yeah, it was I used a ghostwriter, and so like there was a kid that was in my class, and he was like one of my class, and he said, man, you should write a book. Have you ever thought about writing a book? Like, your life is insane. And I said, I thought about it, I just don't know where to start. He said, well, my grandmother's is a ghostwriter and is a great author, and she understands the cop world. Can I introduce you to him? Like, absolutely. So that's how it kind of started. And it was just a great process, to be honest with you. It was fun. We started with their chapters, and we interviewed people, and we would transcribe the interviews, and I would send it. She would send the transcription to me, and then I'd write, and she'd write, and we go back and forth on it. And I just, honestly, I loved every minute of it. It was a passion for me, and I love to write anyway. I enjoy doing spoken word poetry. I enjoy poetry, period. In 2027, I've got a little. I got a rap that I'm going to do at the end of my presentation. So I always try, I enjoy communication and the art of communication, especially when it comes to writing things down, the way words fall onto a piece of paper. I can create an entire world inside of a book that can take me away from whatever is in reality that I don't want to face. And I like how that goes, so it gives me a chance to sometimes you don't have people that you can just open up to, but you can always open up to your journal. You can say whatever you want inside there, and it doesn't have to be punctuated. It doesn't have to have a comma or a semicolon or whatever. It can just be words on a paper. And, what happens is, again, it's scientific, to be honest with you. When you have trauma, it sits in what's called the amygdala in your brain. And when you write it down or when you speak about it, it goes over to what's called the prefrontal cortex. And it's actually a form of processing. And it really does help.
I asked, or you probably don't remember this because you teach a bunch and you talk to a ton of people. But I walked up to you and you said something to me after I introduced myself to you and said, "Hey, my brother, my brother," and which was cool because you knew their names, you remembered their names and stuff, and you said, "Hey, you said something to me. You don't remember it, but you said, can I ask you something?" And I was like, "Yeah," and you said, "What did you think about the rap?" And I said, "It's epic. Leave it," because you were like, "Was it okay? Did it sound all right? What did you think?" Yeah. I said, "Leave it." And I think it's awesome. And I think you're awesome, actually.
Thanks, man.
I think you have totally, your journey is inspiring. I love it. I really, I don't know you incredibly well, but you're a friend for life in my life.
Absolutely. Right back at you. I've been grateful to call you and your family, friends, and keep up with Travis and his kids. And yeah, man, and be on the lookout. Book number 2 is coming out Thanksgiving Day of 2026. So I'm very, very excited for book number 2. Book number 2 is called Beyond Midnight. So Journey to Midnight has been my memoir about everything that kind of happened to me and how I got to, midnight on March 17th. But then Beyond Midnight, which is book number 2, which is coming out Thanksgiving Day, again, 5 years to the day to the release of Journey to Midnight. It's all about what I've learned, lessons learned for me are lessons shared. And what one of the things I'll share is I realized that people weren't hanging out after conferences to buy books. They're hanging out after conferences to buy a book and to say, "Hey, Matt, I'm struggling too." And, vulnerability leads to vulnerability. And it's just amazing how that works. And so,
oh, and when you start out, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, and believe me, I remember a lot more than what I'm sharing here. But one of the things that I remember you saying is that there's somebody in this room that needs to hear this, or something along those lines, and that's what you said. And or there's somebody in this room that's struggling,
Yeah.
right now, and you need to hear this. And you're right. You're absolutely right. It's more than one person, and you and I both know that.
Yeah.
So to have somebody like yourself, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand this. In this business, it just never was talked about. I mean, it was the kiss of death. You're done. I mean, and your candidness and your ability to be able to share that story and to do it in a room of cops it takes a lot of courage to do that. I think I really do believe that. Even in today's world, I think it's more accepted. I don't think that there's near the stigma listed back 10 years, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But you tell this, and he records every one of his
I do
presentations, which I should still do. I used to do that a long time ago. I haven't in a long time, but I should. But I think that's great. And I'm sure you catch yourself going, I'm going to throw that in there. I'm just going to watch this. Do you do that? And does that make you, this has changed the whole trajectory of your life. And I think it's fantastic in a very positive way.
Yeah. And, for me, there's always like healing isn't linear, and I think like if you guys are still listening, like it does, just because I speak about trauma and overcoming adversity, it doesn't mean that trauma and adversity isn't going to hit me. And I think the biggest benefit that I have is in what I call the treasure that's inside the trauma. I mean, listen, when God needed David to be a king, guess what? He didn't send him a crown. He sent him a Goliath. We all have our Goliaths that we need to face every single day. And if you wake up knowing that you've already been at rock bottom and you've gotten through it, there's nothing that anybody can take from me. There's like, I don't care about fame. I don't care about, anything else. Like my offering to this show, my offering on the stage is just my offering. And I don't compare myself to anybody else. I just truly, the worst of my life has given me an insatiable desire to help other people going through that. So I can blame this. I can speak in spite of everything that happened to me, or I can be on these shows in spite of everything, but that's not life. I speak now because of all that, in honor of Benny Jr. He used to be the judge, jury, and executioner in my life. He used to cause me not to sleep at night, but now he speaks to me and he shows me that it's going to be okay, that he gives me hope. He breathes hope into my world, and Brian, his badge number was 111. And, I had a really rough day the other day, and it was pretty sad, and a lot of things just kind of shook out. And I got in my car. I'll send you the picture of this just because, people don't believe me. I got in my car and I put my home address in, and I was 1 hour and 11 minutes away, and I was going to get home at 1:11. And I just looked up and I was like, all right, man, I got you. Thank you for being here with me, man. Yeah. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, I'm on the right path. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And I believe that. And so, man, good for you. What a story. And they just keep coming.
Yeah.
And so, and you're on Beyond Homicide, and that it's appropriate because it's going to be your books about, beyond and what you're doing now and the positive things that you're doing. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, pick up the book. It's a book that's I'm halfway through it. And the reason why I'm halfway through it is because I stayed up till about 2 a.m. when I got to get up at 4:30 in the morning, and I couldn't freaking put the book down. And, I was like, and I was, as I'm reading this thing, seriously, Matt, as I'm reading this thing, I'm like, I can't put this book down. And it's just, and I heard the story, and you tell the story very well. Anything else before we, if you want to get the book, you can go to his website.
Yes.
Which way do you prefer?
See,
your website or Amazon?
All right. Well, I'm gonna be real with everybody. If you order it from me, I will sign it, but it's gonna probably take a week or two for you to get it. If you don't want it signed, you want Jeff Bezos to get the money, you can buy it on Amazon. You can have it in 2 days. But at Matthew A. Griffin, there's my book, and
he will sign it.
That's right. So either way, to be honest with you guys, it's a pleasure either way. So, it's a blessing.
Ladies and gentlemen, check out his book, check out his website. He speaks all over the place, and he even details, what you're going to get out of if you get him as a speaker, what you're going to get. He's not a one-shot. He's not just that one. I mean, he can help in other areas too. Are you still speaking for PLEAT, professional law enforcement training?
Not so much. I really I work full time for a company called GTAC, where I do body worn cameras and in-car video. And then the keynote speaking has really kind of taken off. And then 2027, I've got three keynotes, because there's so much now that I've broken it into the treasure and the trauma, Unbreakable is killing us. And then I do a 4-hour workshop on peer support groups and peer support teams and what I've seen from best practices across the country. I got so many amazing things happening. So yeah.
Laura's in the house. Laura Touch is in the house. She's a counselor. She's a police counselor. Laura, you need to bring him to Louisiana. He needs to come to Louisiana, and I think it would be a perfect addition to speak down there, and for you guys to collaborate as well. She's hearing. I told her to be in here because she saw it when I put this up, and she's perfect. She's a stick of dynamite too. Believe me, she just texted me, so I'll read that in a minute. But she's great, and she's really great in this environment. But like I said, we might even have to have you at the Homicide Investigators of Texas and beyond. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really do appreciate everybody being in here. Man, I appreciate you. I appreciate your candidness. You really bring the energy, and you made this show tonight very special. I think you moved a lot of people. I have no doubt. I was tearing up a little bit occasionally because it's powerful stuff. And there wasn't too many dry eyes in that Montana Narcotics Association either. And so, listen, like I said, when your new book comes out, just give me a quick reminder of it, and I'll basically advertise that on my show as well. And anytime you ever want to come back, if you want to come back and talk about it, you're welcome to come back anytime. And if you come back to Oklahoma, I'd be upset if you didn't reach out, and maybe me and my brother will have dinner with you or something.
That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing, man. This has been received with so much gratitude, man. This has been a great show. It's been a blessing and an honor to be here with you, Jason, and everybody else. Thank you so much for all the positive comments. This is the first time I've ever had a situation like this where it wasn't recorded, and you guys just made this even better. So this has
isn't live
amazing.
Isn't live? Live's cool, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's cool. That's why I like to go live. And so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being in the audience tonight. You know, I say this every time. This show is not a show without you. And I told you he was epic. I think this is definitely one of my top episodes out of the 108. And because he's real and he's telling you some really deep things, and that I, usually this is for law enforcement, but he's sharing this with the public, and that takes a lot to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you again. Don't hang up out of here, Matt. I'm going to talk to you behind the curtain. And ladies and gentlemen, like I said, remember, if you go back, listen to that song that came in on the intro, think about it. We'll probably vote later on. Like I said, if I agree with you, we'll probably go with what you think. But I still like the headbanging music that we have generally on the intros, but we'll see what happens. And I can't think of anything else. Next week, I think we're going to have a medical examiner investigator from Indiana. She didn't get back with me yet, but I think that she's going to be the one that's coming on here. And she's TikTok famous. I think she's got like 750,000 followers. And so, but anyway, she's absolutely fascinating as well. Thank you all. Thank you, Phyllis, for the donation, and buy his book. And if you're looking for a speaker, trust me, I've seen him. I endorse him 100%. Until next week, thank you again, Matt. I appreciate you, buddy. Until next week, take us out, Amanda.